They've had to borrow money from family, so it's a never-ending cycle. You would assume that these families are the families with no income, on benefits and in social housing. The reality is that 75% of children growing up in poverty live in a household where at least one parent works. And this number continues to rise. There are further complications to reported levels of poverty and the inaccuracies of the data. The strong stigma that is attached to poverty and children living in poverty are often bullied at school. A lot of children who are entitled to free school meals don't actually take them, and families do not want their children singled out as being different by being in receipt of these monies. A child aged 14. If your pals are going out for lunch, you'll be a loner. It puts you out on the group, and basically, you sit on your own if you're a free school meal. Poverty affects emotional health in young people. They often struggle with friendships, play alone, and feel isolated. These children do not want to share their lives with others, invite friends around to play, and quite often would not attend social out-of-school activities, putting barriers between them and their peers right from the earliest age. Schools play a vital part in supporting pupils' mental health more recently than ever. It would not be surprising to learn that poverty plays a part in these issues. Schools are well placed to accurately show which children they feel are living in poverty. The statistics are wrong. The black and white has many shades of grey that go unreported. Despite the rise in free school meals over the last year, over 1 million children in poverty across the UK remain ineligible for the entitlement if they did apply. In England, 900,000 children are missing out. In Scotland, 25,000 children are missing out. In Wales, 55,000 children are missing out, and in Northern Ireland, 20,000 children. That's 1 million children that are missing out in the UK. In addition to this, there are so many children unaccounted for due to coming from families that are refugee, migrant, and those who have no recourse to public funds. These families cannot access free school meals. Free school meals is often used as a measure for poverty and deprivation, but how inaccurate is this measure? It is concerning as a head teacher, a mother, and a human being that we are not better equipped to tackle such life-changing factors in a child's life. With the rising cost of living, pressures on families, decades of financial cuts and underfunding, and the inability to meet basic needs, something needs to be done. The futures and life chances of so many could be so drastically different. Conference calls on the National Executive to launch a national campaign to highlight the growing scandal of child poverty in the UK. Child poverty should be a thing of the past. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Emily, for contributing to a really powerful debate there, which, as I said, really builds on so much of what's already been discussed today and decided upon in terms of actions going forward. Is there anyone who wants to add to that? Is there anyone who wants to bring further points? I don't see anybody. Can you, Magnus? No. Okay, in which case we'll move straight to a vote then. So all those in favour, please. Thank you. And all those against? The motion is unanimously passed. Thank you very much. It's not sanitised.
I've been to the Labour conference, the Tory conference with Ruth, and the other night, sanitising me because I've been to I won't say which party conference, and I introduced Ruth to my wife Julia. It was a couple of nights ago, and I said, I've had far more meals out with Ruth, Julia, than I have with you. Oh, the mic's not on. Probably just as well, actually, then. I do wish the mic had been off earlier when I mentioned those comments. There we go. Ruth, thank you for that. That was number 30, was it?
Yes.
Excellent, great. Moving straight on then to motion 31. That's the carbon neutral state education system. This is in the name of the North West region and the Staffordshire branch proposer, Jim Nicholson.
Stockport branch. Jim Nicholson, Stockport branch. I'm actually on the podium, not for Stockport branch, but actually representing Cumbria, because one of our colleagues who had normally been here is unable to join us today. So Graham asked me to speak on this particular motion. So I hope I do him proud, because his passion for this particular subject matter is unsurpassable. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Those of us that were at Telford a while ago now will have heard Graham talk about the event that he held in Cumbria. And so I feel quite privileged that I'm actually speaking on his behalf about, effectively, what is climate change, one of the biggest aspects of our children's future. So at Telford, Graham stood on the stage and he shared with us the event that he'd organised as the first Youth Climate Summit. And I don't know if you recall, but the passion that our children spoke with at that event was incredible. It was inspirational. Their knowledge surpassed so many adults. And I'm sure you find that in your own schools. They know so much more than we do. And they actually have a genuine care for the planet that is going to be theirs in the future. I was so inspired, I went back to Stockport and got extremely excited, and then worked with Manchester University, and we held the very first Stockport Climate Summit. And we had over 100 children speaking in the auditorium in the physics department. It was incredible. The passion, again, was amazing. The understanding, the knowledge, unsurpassable once again. And I felt humbled by what our children were actually saying. And yet our education system, not teaching and learning, the fabric by which we actually work within, is failing them already. Our children want action and change. Did anybody watch Earthshot, the Earthshot Awards, just recently? And David Attenborough was speaking. Incredible change is needed. In our schools, we do our best. We do, with the resources that we have, a range of different projects. We might have switch off fortnight. We might do walk to school weeks. We might do bike and scoot to school weeks. We do recycling cardboard and paper and batteries. We have pressure taps to save a bit of water. We recycle artworks. We have yogurt makers. Meat-free Fridays. We collect food waste for compost. And we have environmental-based projects. And yet, while we could be making a significant difference to our carbon footprint, we're unable to. And it comes back to funding. Years of insufficient funding and underinvestment have faced school leaders with some difficult choices to make. Cheaper options over environmentally sound options. Ethical procurement is often compromised. Many of you work in buildings with energy-inefficient roofs, windows, walls, although, mind you, many of you got great buildings for collecting water. Our children sit in buildings that don't reflect a commitment to the climate crisis. To support the quality teaching and learning in our schools regarding climate change, schools could be the education for the future by the fabric by which our children actually sit in. We need and we must demand that across all phases of education, a policy of invest to save replaces short-term or false economy investments. We must demand that the government considers the long-term savings through carbon reduction possible through fitting and retrofitting school premises with renewable energy saving and energy generating technology. We should demand for reductions in any red tape which slow down or restrict schools in making ethical, environmentally sound procurement choices, including capital improvements, and recommend that capital funding includes an additional ring-fenced allocation for carbon reduction measures, provide recommendations to schools on steps to achieving carbon reduction, and most of all, we do this lobbying the government because of the urgency needed to safeguard the future for our children. Conference, I move.
Thank you. Do we have, yes, we have a speaker at mic 2.
It's not me. Colleagues, this is fundamental. I just want to share with you something very quick that's happening in the North West region. There is a real move to get Eden Project North built, and around that there is a pre-birth to 25 initiative that all the stakeholders, preschool, primary school, secondary school, further education and universities are all signed up to, called the Morecambe Bay Curriculum. It's not a scheme, it's not something you buy, it's a philosophy owned by the children, with the aim that they'll understand about the importance of place-based learning in line with the national curriculum, but also the idea that we have a duty of care to look after our planet, and they're the people that can do it, inspired by Greta Thunberg. So the aim of this is that we help the children be the voice. They are our future. The world that they will live will be one that we aren't around for, and we have a duty of care to make it as sustainable and alive as possible. And climate change is on our doorstep. And this move that's happening in Morecambe is rippling around the country. The Eden Project philosophy is going to be shared at COP26. The government has woken up to this. International leaders are interested in this. The idea being it's a philosophy that will go across the country, but not Morecambe. It's owned by the country wherever it is. It's owned by the nations wherever they are. But the idea is we can do this, we can turn the tide, and we need to start, and we need to empower the children to be able to be the voice, for they will be the future leaders. So I strongly support the motion. Thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Hello, Lorna Legg, South West Region. Didn't really want to be up here again, but I just wanted to say in support of this motion, as with all of the other motions, there are incredibly powerful things happening that mean that we should be looking fundamentally at the structures that are surrounding our families. This one is coming down the line, and there's nothing we can do about it unless we do adapt and change. And actually, I tried really hard 2 years ago to get my local authority to fund an air source heat pump or something similar. Even to look into it was a real struggle and a fight. And it's ridiculous. I've had an oil tank replaced. We're so poorly funded, I couldn't turn it down and leave my school without heating. So actually, we have to be fighting for this because it's something we can't avoid unless we act now. And the cost of it will be enormous if we don't. Thank you. And so I support the motion.
Thank you. We will now move to the vote. Can I ask those in favour to show, please? Thank you. Those against? That is overwhelmingly carried. Thank you. Now we move to motion number 32. That's to do with qualified teacher status. It's standing in the name of the professional committee. Proposer is Simon Kidwell, seconder James Field.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Simon Kidwell, Executive Member from the Professional Committee. I became a member of the NHT back in 1999, and those who heard the real David Cameron burst into Prince a few years ago, don't worry, I'm not going to sing any Prince. But I'm really proud that we are now an association that calls itself the School Leaders Union. And thank you, Mr. President, for actually reinforcing our commitment to trade unionism yesterday in your fantastic speech. 1999 was a year, which we look back to, we've got the Millennium Dome that reminds us of that outside, but it was a year when the minimum wage was introduced at £3.60. It was a year when the current Prime Minister was writing about cars for GQ magazine. 99 was a year when the only bug that dominated the headline was the Millennium Bug. So it was the start of my leadership journey, and in the intervening years, I've led 3 primary schools maintained by the local authority, and I call myself a proud, maintained school leader. However, I also work as a trustee and a MAT, and I'm delighted that we've become far more inclusive of our trust leaders, and they should never feel they have to apologise for being part of a MAT and being sector leaders in that system. So in those 11 years, I've seen 11 Secretaries of State come and go. I've been through multiple Ofsted inspections from grades 1 to 4, and I've also seen standards in my school and schools across the system reach an all-time high. Alongside my role as a school leader and trade union official, I also work as a local authority school improvement advisor. I will get to the point of the motion soon. I know it's a bit rambling. I read it this morning and thought, gosh, you'd get to the point. And I really think that we can work in different structures and have what I like to call a mixed economy. And I've seen rapid and sustained improvement across faith schools, maintained schools, and multi-academy trusts. Brothers and sisters, after 22 years of school leadership, it is my firm view that people and partnerships improve schools, not structures. Fast forward to 2020 and 21, this has been a year that's tested us like no others, and thank you so much for colleagues for speaking out about their mental well-being. I think I'd also like to speak out about my physical well-being that's taken a real downturn in the past 18 months. So we really do need to listen to what's been said today. It's been described as the greatest shock in education. And as we continue to experience record numbers of positive cases in our schools, we know as school leaders that the story of COVID is yet to be fully told within our schools. However, I also feel the continued challenges have energised and supported us, and I'm really proud of the continued partnership we have with outstanding civic leaders from across the system. And those civic leaders include public health teams, who've been amazing, local authority officers, school leaders, trustees, CEOs, and our trade union professionals. I think the team at NHT have just been absolutely amazing throughout this, and I am so proud that they are system leaders that have helped us along the way. So we've actually rebuilt our communities, switched overnight to online learning, and most importantly, we're building confidence with our parents. And one of the unheralded heroes of schools in the response to the pandemic is our school business leaders, and I was delighted to hear Rachel championing them this morning. School business leaders, they've worked tirelessly to manage budgets amidst escalating COVID costs, staff absences and loss of income for extended services. Oh gosh, 1 minute. First class remote learning, get to my point. The big, oh God, I'm sorry, I didn't time this. It's changed beyond recognition, and I think we also must recognise that some of our school business leaders are now working in multi-academy trusts as chief financial officers or chief operating officers. So what we do have currently is a vague guidance saying that anybody leading an education establishment should have QTS. But I want to give opportunities for those fantastic school business leaders who are now working in trusts to actually, if it's right for the trust, to actually apply to become a CEO. We have one in Cheshire who was a chief financial officer. However, the big point is whoever's leading on teaching and learning should have QTS, and they should have the influence to actually be able to influence decisions around teaching and learning. So that's my motion. Time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. We have a speaker, I think, at microphone 1.
Okay, I think I know what Simon was trying to say. So one of the things to do the balanced approach with that, and about the QTS, is that at my school, so what I didn't get to say, because I was in too much of a state to get to the end of my speech, was I'm in a tiny, tiny school of 69 children. And so my senior leadership team is myself, it is the lead teacher who teaches year 4, 5 and 6, and it is my school business lead, who I know I can't teach enough, I can't pay enough, really, than what she deserves. But we have to have that balance, because she will often say, well, why are you delivering the harvest around the village? Why are we bothering to do that this year? And then we had someone who was near suicidal, and the fact that our children turned up at the door and, with harvest gifts and cards and things like that meant the world to them. And also she doesn't understand the curriculum, so she's looking at it from a financial point of view. So you must have those QTS people there. You must have those with the teaching background and the curriculum, because they've got the whole picture there, and you need the finance too. But all of you on the senior leadership team need to understand the whole picture.
I think do we have a speaker at mic 2? Thank you.
I have an excellent school business leader in my school. She's one of the most valued members of the staff. She is brilliant. And I'm sure in this room there are lots of excellent school business leaders. And what I'm going to say, in no way am I trying to undermine their position, their skills, their expertise, or their contribution. However, I find myself in a position where I cannot support this motion, because if the most important thing in our organisation is teaching and learning, the person in overall charge must have a good grasp of what that is about, not just for credibility, but for driving the change and moving forward. Colleagues, I will be opposing this motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for or against this motion? Thank you. Simon, as we've had someone who's spoken against the motion, you do have the right of reply. I saw some hands at the back. Does anybody else want to come up and speak? Right.
So currently our guidance is very vague and woolly around this, but we've actually discussed it with our professional committee, and we're talking about those examples where those first generation CFOs and COOs who actually don't have QTS are applying to become CEOs. It's still rare. You still get mostly it's people with QTS becoming CEOs, but actually there are a few examples there, and we feel we're actually putting a real barrier for our school business members, because we're saying current guidance is actually quite strong, saying you should have QTS. So we're saying in those exceptional circumstances where you've got a school business leader with the skills, but you've also got somebody with QTS within that trust as a deputy CEO or something like that, that we will actually make that guidance a little bit tighter. Is that helpful? No? So what we're saying is that we think that QTS should be, one of the senior trust leaders should have QTS. But occasionally the CEO role, which is very different than head teaching, it's very different being a school principal, that actually sometimes a CFO who's got an accounting background might be the best person for that trust. That's what we're saying.
Simon, I suspect there are a few people who wish to ask questions or clarification or any other comments. So I'm going to invite anybody else who wishes to speak. I've seen a few hands up to come up to the mic. And Simon, then at the end, I will give you a final right of reply. But if you wish some further clarification, rather than calling out, could you please come up to one of the two mics? So if you've got anything else you want to say. And Simon, I'll come back to you at the very end. Okay, everybody, please listen. Thank you.
I suppose it would be different,
Name and
Simon,
branch, please.
Sorry, Katrina Stewart, Cheshire. I suppose I'm probably not going to agree with Comrade Kidwell over there, because I do believe that you have that. There's that core business around understanding young children, families, that sort of you've been living and breathing since your NQT year. It is arguable that the CEO of a very large multi-academy trust might be different, but a lot of multi-academy trusts are in fact quite small. And I would like to bring us back to an earlier motion around the pay and remuneration and the status and levels of school business officers, because I think if we got that right and they're paid at a senior leadership level, then you're not putting a ceiling on people's careers, but actually every teacher's worked hard for their qualifications, and so I would... Sorry, Simon, I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Before I invite Simon back, is there anyone else who wishes to comment or ask a point of clarification? Rachel, thank you, Rachel. Rachel's coming to Simon. If you could hold on, please. Thank you. And Rachel, thank you, at mic 2.
Yeah, I think I am actually the only school business leader in the room, so I can't not speak on behalf of my colleagues. What we're trying to say here, I think, is that our current policy position as a union is that the person in charge of an educational institution, whatever that institution is, whether it's a school or a trust or, you know, whatever that structure is, has to have QTS. We have had, at National Executive, long discussions about this, many discussions over probably about 2 years before we've actually brought this motion to conference. And it's been a battle, to be honest. We've battled with each other and come to this point where we've agreed on this wording as a committee. And I think I totally take on board what Katrina said about, you know, teachers. I have every respect for teachers and they've worked hard for their qualifications. I've worked hard for my qualifications, as have my other school business leader colleagues. And, you know, there's somebody that sits on our school business leader sector council who started off as a finance director in the trust where she works. She's now been appointed CEO of that trust because obviously her trustees believe that she's the right person for the job to continue that journey of taking that trust forward. So totally take on board and I agree with what Simon said about it being exceptional. And I think it's like any job, it's got to be what's right for that organisation. So we're not saying school business leaders are going to take over the world. That's not what we want to do. And we have the interests of children and families at our hearts in the same way as teachers do.
Thank you, Rachel. We have a speaker, James, at mic 1.
I just wanted to sort of echo what Rachel said. We did spend a lot of time on the professional committee looking at real examples of different structures across the country. And I just want to sort of say that there's good intentions in this, and perhaps there's things we need to work on. But where we could have not had the qualified teacher status in at all, which some Matts might like, we actually really want a robust statement in there which says qualified teacher status is absolutely necessary for the leader of education, leader of learning in a structure. And we did that with good intentions. And actually that corresponds with everything we do on professional in terms of valuing the profession, valuing qualified teacher status, in all the things we set up. So, yes, I totally understand your points. And we're all worried about the same thing. We're all worried about, maths and structures doing things on the cheap, which is why we wanted qualified teacher status for the leader of education. And like I said, we did spend a lot of time on it, and it was done with good intentions.
Thank you, James. We have a speaker at microphone 2.
Thank you, Conference. I didn't really intend to come up, but and I find it quite difficult not supporting a colleague. But I think we've spent this conference talking about our role and our professional duty. And I don't think I can hand on heart stand up for something that will erode our status. We fight to be educators. We take on all those roles that, like colleagues said, I'm not a mental health worker, but I try my best. I just don't feel comfortable by saying the leaders of our education system are not educationalists. I'm very sorry about that.
And a speaker at mic 1, please.
Yeah, my concern is that, I think I was speaking before, in a school, and as we count countless bits of research that's shown this, the single most important person, and I don't mean that in a snobbish way, is the head teacher. That's whose name's on the paper when Ofsted come in. That's who the parents will go to with complaints, difficulties, etc., etc. The head teacher can also make decisions for their governing body. Now, we're a small school, lots of small schools work like that, really part of the communities, and can respond flexibly to those demands. I think when you've got a more corporate structure where there's a lead for learning and teaching, but they're not the decision maker. So therefore, it loses its soul. So I can't support this motion.
Before I invite Simon for the final right of reply, is there anyone else who wishes to speak or comment? No, right then, Simon, this is your right of reply.
Thank you. Isn't it great to have a debate? I think this is a really important thing, and I really like motions where we get to talk about things and have a proper debate, because we agree on 99.9% of things, don't we? But I want you to consider when making your decision, whether you abstain, you agree, or you vote against, what message will this send out? We're not saying head teachers shouldn't have QTS. We're not saying executive heads shouldn't have QTS. We're saying that unique, overarching of a trust role could potentially, in a very small minority of cases, not have QTS. And when you're making a decision, think about the message this will send out to our business leaders, of only which we think as one is in the room, if we actually decide to do two in the room. Sorry, Rachel, I thought she was the only one in the room. What message will that send to that community? Because Rachel works just as hard as I do. She's as highly qualified as I am, and she's... No, but I'm saying we shouldn't be putting a lid on the opportunity for people in the school business community. Thank you, colleagues.
Well, thank you, Simon. I can always rely on you to liven things up, but although joking apart, I agree, it's really healthy to have a debate. Now, when we take the vote on this, if I can ask, the hands got very clearly, and I'm going to obviously leave it longer so we can get, because clearly there's going to be votes on both sides of this. So, we're going to move to the vote. First of all, those in favour, could you very clearly please raise a hand? Thank you. And those against? And that motion is overwhelmingly lost. Thank you. Right, we move on to motion number 33. That is initial teacher training. It is standing in the name of the professional committee. Patrick, you are proposing. This is on page 46.
Hi, conference. Sorry, I'm just loading up my phone here.
That's okay.
I'm not just looking at tweets. I'm actually got my speech. Okay, conference. Almost a year and a half into the ongoing global pandemic, it is clear that educational recovery and the return to a new normal remain the overriding priorities for everyone involved in educating children. The expertise required to secure continuing improvement in initial teacher training is to be found within schools and providers, both small and large, and through collaboration with higher education institutions. Harnessing collective professional wisdom holds the key to further improvement of training opportunities for new generations of teachers. Given the current ongoing situation and with the avalanche of new and returning initiatives, it is very difficult to understand why the government would choose to add unnecessary risk into the system by embarking on a major reform of teacher training at this time. No compelling case has been made by the government to demonstrate the need to reinvent the architecture of teacher training, and no evidence is provided to demonstrate that the sector, as currently constituted, is unable to deliver further improvement. The envisaged changes risk destabilising the ITT market and reducing the supply of training places at the worst possible time. Currently, this country is already looked up to around the world as one of the best places a teacher can learn and master their craft. Because of the number of world-leading institutions, the news that a number of these universities and colleges have already indicated that the proposals, if implemented, are likely to lead their complete withdrawal from initial teacher training is of considerable concern. This would represent an incalculable loss to the education system, undermining the overall depth, diversity and strength of ITT provision and irreparably damage Britain's global reputation for education research. The review also presents its preferred approach as being unarguable, implying that it is based solely on accepted and compelling evidence about which some form of consensus exists across the schools and ITT sectors. This is simply not the case. There is little agreement that a homogeneous approach to curriculum delivery and assessment in initial teacher training is either desirable or required to drive higher standards. The presence of strongly held opposing views suggests that more time is required to engage sector in discussion of the rationale. School leaders, teachers and ITT sector can see this. Before moving forward, government must ensure that any teacher training has the full support for professionals in both sectors. As school leaders and as an association, we are always willing to engage in a full programme of consultation, beginning with an examination of the rationale for change. Such engagement with the new minister could begin in autumn 2021, allowing time to fully consult those involved, to access their expertise and knowledge, to collaboratively build an effective teacher training offered together in partnership with all stakeholders. I move.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak at either of the mics? Come forward to mic 2, please.
Katrina Stewart, Cheshire, and I had planned not to say anything else, but I do feel really strongly about this. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. It doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And I do think that when you're talking about it's not all about elite universities. It really isn't all about that. I've got my teachers have come from a range of pathways into teaching, some from very elite universities, others not. But once you take the elite universities out of the equation, you're downgrading the teaching job and you're becoming more of a technician. And I think this is very much linked to the politicisation of education, and it's part of a culture war, and it's part of all the things that are sneaking in about the values and the way you're supposed to teach. And I think this is not only wrong, but it's actually quite dangerous.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Let us move to the vote then. If you are in favour, please indicate. Thank you. All those against? That is unanimously carried. Thank you. Moving then to motion number 34. This is expectations of children. It is standing in the name of, my home branch, the Hertfordshire branch. So you better vote for this one, as I'm going to get really fed up. Okay. No pressure there. It's motion 46, and the proposer, Christine de Graaf Hansen.
Colleagues, good afternoon. I wasn't actually expecting to speak to this motion, but I will do my best on this. We look at each child as an individual, and that is what we expect the government to be looking at. There is not a one-size-fits-all. Children don't fit one size. You cannot put them all in the same school. You cannot give them all the same provision. When government sends down messages for us as school leaders and makes the expectations very generic, it is impossible to let the children be what they can be. Each child is an individual. Each child will achieve uniquely. And that is what we should be fighting to make sure that the government understands. Each child is valued. You cannot put a price on the child who gets 11 A stars as they used to be, or 11 9s today. That child has not achieved any more or less than the child in my school who has learned to tie a shoelace by the end of year 11, or the child who has learned to feed themselves by the end of year 11, or the child who has learned that I do not have to hit somebody to get a message across. That is an achievement. Ofsted doesn't actually measure that. When they talk about floor standards, progress 8, and all those other things. We've talked about SATs today. SATs is meaningless to some of our children. So the children I work with, SATs is nothing. There are some children in my school who achieve very highly on the CAT4 test. Mine is a special school. But they would not survive in a mainstream school. They have to be in a special needs school. That does not make them any less or better than the children in a mainstream school. So conference, I urge you to urge the government or to urge national executive to very clearly send a message to the government. Every single child in this country is unique. We need to value them for that uniqueness. We need to recognize, we talked about diversity in this room. Diversity means more than being a member of the BAME community, belonging to the LBGT. Diversity is being valued for who you are and what you bring to the table. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Christine. Speaker at microphone 1.
I think this small motion is incredibly powerful. And one of the words I heard earlier, which makes my blood boil, was the word illiteracy. And this encaptures those feelings that I have about that word, illiteracy and enumerate. So we heard earlier from Nadine that he came over, I think when he was 3 and he didn't speak any English. If he'd been 11 or 10 when he came over, he possibly wouldn't have passed the reading SATs, not because he was illiterate, because he wasn't ready for it yet. So many of our children in my school, in many of our schools, can't get to that level yet. But to use a word like illiterate or enumerate is shocking and inaccurate and untrue, false, patronising, degrading, humiliating, etc. So the words we use and the words that we should fight for and the words that we should disown as a profession are really important in this emotion. So emotion. So it's the same thing. So yeah, just two words that I would think we really should campaign on, and we should not hear those words from a Secretary of State for Education, because they are untrue and very damaging. And those words may have been used about him if his journey to England was just a few years later. And we cannot use those words about our children. Thank you.
Conference, I was actually going to say something very similar to what my illustrious colleague has just said, Sarah, because our Secretary of State this morning spoke about maths and English quite a lot, didn't he? And it was very, very limiting in our thinking. If you may recall a paper that was done by Sir Ken Robinson, All Our Futures, and it actually talked about the whole person and why we have amazing musicians in this country, for example, like Sir Simon Rattle. He interviewed Stephen Hawking, if you recall, in that document. And actually, it was about how we flourish as individuals, how we grow the potential in the individual person, and we're not just two-dimensional maths and English. So actually, this motion says an awful lot, and it must be supported. Thank you, Conference.
Michelle Sheehy from Walsall Branch. I think lots of people think that I have a thing about SATs, and I do. But the reason why I have a thing about it really stems from about 3 or 4 years ago when I had an autistic child in my year 6. We're a one-form entry school, every child is 3%. This child was 3%, which I needed. And I made him do the SATs. And I am so ashamed of myself for doing that. And I said at that time, excuse me, I still feel really bad about it now. I said at that time that I would never, ever do that again. So, and also the other thing that has really touched a chord is that I've got a grandson. I've got 3 grandchildren, and my youngest one is 3, and he's autistic, and we haven't experienced that in our family before. But everything that Christine said applies to him. So, I urge you to support this.
Thank you. Simon, mic 2, please.
I remember back in 2017 when the new standards came out and standards dropped allegedly by 30% because we had a new assessment system. And they brought in the new language of expected standard. We had a child that got 99 in the reading. Her mom, when she got the report, went and ripped it up and never told her that she wasn't working the expected standard. So I want to strengthen this by saying we should be campaigning and working as executives to get rid of these cliff edge language around assessment.
Okay. Mic 1, Marika, please.
Thanks, Marika Miles. I'm not going to speak about SCND, but I would just like to remind the association of the power that we've got within our own capacity intellectually. We mentioned earlier that Rona chairs the National Forum for Neuroscience and Special Education, which I also sit on. And as an association, we've got very, very long associations with some of the leading neuroscientists in our country, such as Barry Carpenter. What we know is that children's brains are fundamentally changing, partly led by the levels of prematurity within our population and the number of children who do not go full term in the womb, whose brain matter does not develop in vitro, which fundamentally changes the structure. And the figures are absolutely astonishing on this. And this really leads us to the intellectual argument about the fact that age-related expectations are really increasingly invalid in terms of the way that we describe children's development. This isn't not a moral argument, it's an intellectual argument, it's a scientific argument. So we need to draw on that and understand that it's a changing population. This kind of language just has to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike 2.
I'm Mike. I'm from East Yorkshire. First of all, I'm talking about HICMAT. HICMAT in my school has a gentleman like this, who, by the way, has been brilliant the last couple of days. Yeah, he's not going to get his phonics. Simple. It's as simple as that. But we've got to change the language ourselves. I got into trouble with the local authority. I know, shocking my branch. I know you'd be shocked about that. Local advisor on Thursday, before I came down, told me that there were schools that were giving expected in writing for moderation in year 2. When those kids have not had any education since, what, nursery because of the pandemic? How are we grading children as expected in writing? My argument was, what were they doing before COVID then? If those kids are expected now, they should have been outstanding back then. So we need to change the language ourselves. Let's stop using that. Let's not play the game. They cannot be expected in year 2, 3 weeks into a term where they've had no thing. So absolutely, we need to change the language. Thank you.
Last time Rona was about to speak, I was very worried. I'm not very worried now, Rona, but it's great to hear you again.
I wasn't going to, but it was just following up. First of all, the last speaker. Yes, we can change the way we speak ourselves and be very careful. But following on from what Marika said, age-related expectations from the government's point of view says all children will. No, they won't. Yeah.
have to say, Rona, I hope you keep coming to conference well into your 90s. I think I should put that to the vote, actually, shouldn't I? All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? OK, let's move to the vote for the Hertfordshire branch motion. No pressure. All those in favour? Thank you. Hands down. All those against? Brilliant. Thank you. That is unanimously carried. Well done. OK. We now move to motion number 35. Interesting title here. Appointment of Education Secretary. I guess we should have debated this about 2 weeks ago, but there we go. It's standing in the name of the Hertfordshire and Staffordshire branch, and the proposer, I believe, is Christine again.
Thank you. So, Christine de Graft Hansen, I don't think I introduced myself, but I'm Hertfordshire branch. Inrianum, and that actually means siblings in my language. Why are we here on this glorious Saturday afternoon? I'll tell you. When the children in our schools enjoy their learning and achieve and bask in those achievements, that's when we have our whys. That's why we do what we're doing. That's why we are here today. Research has told us the single most important school-related factor in student learning is teaching. You wouldn't know that from the media, but hey. It stands to reason then that we must be involved in policy making. You would think the government would involve us at the onset when it's talking about policy. It can't have every single teacher turning up at the DFE, but we have got our leaders in our trade union reps, and they should be listening to them. Consistency is essential in education. Consistency of high quality provision and of effective leadership. Sadly, a lack of consistency is what we have had for the last 10 to 11 years. We have seen 6 education secretaries in that time, with only Gove and Williamson in post for more than 2 years. And we know what Gove and Williamson did. Compare that with the length of service of Russell Hobby, 7 years, and now Paul, 4 years and counting, and more. If any school had the changes of leadership that the DFE has had in that same time frame, Ofsted would be all over them like a rush. Yeah? It is such a shame there's no Ofsted for the DFE. But hey, you never know, you might get one. As school leaders, we know policy is vital for the educational outcomes for the children and young people we all acknowledge are our future. When policy making is so desperately poor as to have unions unite and vote no confidence in an education secretary's policies, we have a problem. We have consistently and collectively raised our voices in despair at the poor leadership from the DFE, and I will not dwell on that so as not to revisit our pain. We have the leaders in our trade union reps, leaders with experience, and we have the experience of ourselves in here. We are committed to education, to working to make the UK a world leader in education for this and generations of children to come. We deserve and want an education secretary with the confidence to recognize and respect that. One who will work with us, trust us, that we know we have the pedagogy, we know what we're doing, and will trust us to work with them to determine policy. We have had enough of poor direction from those who have little or no knowledge of the education systems they are meant to lead and represent. Change is upon us, but we are used to change, as evidenced during the pandemic. We recognize that our education secretary is willing to work with us, and we thank him for this and for attending our conference. We welcome him to his role and are fully prepared to engage. We're full of hope that this is not a false dawn, that he will drive positive and real change in funding and policy making, so that the children who are our why and our future enjoy the best possible educational experiences during their school years. We will hope, we will work with, but we will most certainly hold to account, as we are held to account. The children and young people of the UK deserve no less. Mr. President, Nyanum, I move.
Thank you. Emily, if you wish to speak at mic 1, and if you'd like to come to mic 2, please. Thank you. Emily.
This motion is so strong that 2 regions proposed it together. That is the feeling, and I think the feeling amongst the room as well, and I really hope you strongly support it. Our children are on a journey. They're on their educational journey, they're on their future journey, and they join us on that bus. But what we don't want is the person to be driving that bus not to have the necessary skills to do so. We need to be safe in what we're doing and in safe hands. So I support this motion.
Thank you. Speaker from mic 2.
Thank you. Helen Collins from Cornwall branch. I'm just mindful of the fact that we've just voted to not have CEOs with QTS. So here's a thought. What about if our Education Secretary had to have QTS as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker at mic 2.
Can I just say, these people that are wiping the podiums between speakers have done phenomenally well. So, well done. Brilliant. So, I hope that doesn't count in 1 minute, but I'll make it quick. Colleagues, we know there's new baseline assessment this year. 7 years before we'll see the impact of that. There'll be 2 general elections, probably 2 changes of philosophy. It's up to us to get it right for the children. And I think it's Canada that has secretaries of state who are professionals in the field that they're secretaries of state for. So the Secretary of State of Education now, who spoke today, needs to listen to us. He needs to trust us. They trusted us with the pandemic when they were flapping around like chickens with no heads. We stood up and we were counted, and our children were safe with us. We made decisions with no notice, and our children were safe with us. They still learned, and in many ways they thrived. Sometimes at home, sometimes at school. But we did not let them down. And we won't let them down. We know we do this job because that's what we do. We want the best for our children. I would say to the government, I dare you to work with us for a policy with us, drawn with us, that will be more than the term of a general election, more than a term of a government. Give us 10 years to show what we can do, and we will not be found wanting, and our children will thrive. I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more speakers, so I will then move to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. And those against? That is unanimously carried. Thank you. We have 3 more motions to go. Number 36 is policy changes. It's standing in the name of the Sunderland branch. It's the top of page 47 in your booklet. Proposer is Deborah. Welcome, Deborah.
Hi everybody, I realise I keep popping up here and I never say who I am, so I'm really sorry. My name's Deborah de Muscamp from the North East, representing Sunderland branch. And I hope I don't repeat what other colleagues have said, but I said at lunchtime that I feel humbled at the courage of the colleagues in the room that trusted us to share their stories. So I'd like to say thank you for that. I don't know how you did it. I was in pieces down there, and you stood up here and said it. I mean, absolute respect to you, and greatest of thanks. So thank you for that. Thank you. I felt like we had a moment. It was a moment, and a very special moment, probably in my career, that I've never felt. And I was struggling for the word, and I think it's solidarity. And there was true solidarity, and I didn't really know what that meant. I always thought it was for Labour Party conference. But you know what? It's been in this room today, and I feel very, very lucky to have been here, so thank you. OK, policy changes. As we'd say in the North East, not a really proper sexy motion, this, is it? Not proper sexy. Nearly 3 o'clock on a Saturday, the sun's shining, and it's number 36, so let's crack on. OK, so policy change. But we've listened today about well-being, about the erosion of us as people and professionals, and I hope, colleagues, you can see how this sits into this culture that has been generated and created by our government. Whether Nadine will stop that culture, well, we'll wait and see. So, change, I mean, good grief. We are masters of change, aren't we? And that was before the pandemic. The one constant in our lives as leaders is change. We live it, we breathe it. And when we embark on change in our organisations, we may get all a bit theoretical and employ Cotter's model of support for change management. We all know about change management. I went through workforce transformation. I was a very different girl before then. So, it's a well-known theory, Cotter's 8-step, and it has some principles. And this 8-step process, and I'm going to tell you this because we know about swanky things like this in the North East, so consider this an education from our North East fancy ways. Underpinned by strong communication. We're good at that, aren't we, girls and boy, in the North East? We can chat. So, but success depends on the ability to communicate well, honestly, confidently, regularly, throughout the process of change. But not only to speak, but to listen. Good grief, 2 minutes. School policy change during the time of COVID has been regular, rapid and unpredictable. Different kind of motion, maybe. And of course, we understand there wasn't a handbook to guide us through a pandemic. But surely we would have expected some kind of knowledge and practice of change and crisis management from our government. Some, of course, may say we don't need models of change because actually we've got the next best bright idea, courtesy of Mr. Johnson. However, in the real world of professionals, we take change very seriously. We have a model, and we take it seriously because we're invested in the people that we are changing or wanting to change. Leaders show, by consulting and communicating, that their approach demonstrates the culture of the organisation. It illustrates that the organisation is committed to communicating, consulting, considering throughout the process. It suggests trust. As we all know, the first communication in crisis is crucial. I can't think of a worse way that we were communicated before the COVID crisis. I think 8 o'clock, wasn't it, the night before? So I've been contemplating and stretching my imagination if ministers know about Cotter. First step, create a sense of urgency. Pandemic did that one, so that's a big tick. Moving on to the next one, creating a guiding coalition. Houston, we have a problem. We're the guiding coalition. We're the ones that were going to make it happen. We weren't informed. We weren't trusted. How can we, as a workforce, become an agent of change when our agency is being eroded? And the reason it's being eroded is we are not told anything about anything. It's Twitter. It's Schools Week. It's I don't know, social media, somebody down the pub that tells your parent, that tells you on the yard. All these things happen. Oh, bugger. I told you we could chat. OK, conference. Can I finish it?
Yes,
Or do I
please
have to
do,
get down?
yeah.
Okay.
I think you finished it when you said bugger, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it makes you look good, Tim, for all your indiscretions through today. At least I didn't swear. My apologies. OK. Imagine what the government could have done if it had really communicated with us. Imagine it would have got us on its side. We would have almost trusted, almost had confidence in what our government could do with us as a team. My previous colleague said that. And so very simply, conference, I'm showing my age because I'm an old bird. I had a favourite song in the 90s, Delamitri. And the song was, Why Am I Always the Last to Know? So conference, can we be at the top of the distribution list? Can we be the first to know when there's a policy change, an apology change, when there's a policy change, when something new comes out? That's all I'm asking, conference. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Tim, for your patience.
And until then, you'd all been so nice to me. Right, OK. Is there anyone else who wants to, after that, say anything or contribute? I loved it, Deb. I loved it. Seriously. OK, I look, somebody, yes, microphone 2, please.
Hi, Ian Taylor, Nottingham City. I just want us all to be aware that actually the lack of communication on policy change might sometimes be to do with incompetence or urgency or things that they don't understand, but sometimes it is deliberate, and sometimes it is deliberate to keep us out of the loop, and we just need to watch for that as well.
Thank you. I am now going to move to the vote. So all those in favour of this non-sexy motion, so we're all absolutely clear, hands up, please. Thank you very much. And all those against? Against? Oh, your hand was still up. No, that's all right. OK. That's a relief, because instead of overwhelming, it's now unanimously carried. Thank you very much. OK, moving on swiftly to motion number 37 on forced academisation. Standing in the name of the West Midlands branch. This could be a good one. Right, Michelle, over to you.
Right, I'm back to my normal fierce self now. It's another one of my favourites. And I've had to slightly adjust it after our Secretary of State spoke earlier. So, conference. Conversion to academy status has been an option for schools since the introduction of the Academy Act in 2010. The key word here is option. Schools must have a choice. The issue is not academisation, but forced academisation. Over a decade later, 70% of schools in the primary sector have made the decision not to convert, despite the threats, the bribes and government cheerleading. I'm guessing that in the same way as the Secretary of State has indicated is his preferred way of working, that these decisions were based on evidence. The decision on academy conversion must be made by the people who know the school best. There has never been a one-size-fits-all approach to education, and nor should there ever be. Schools embedded in their local communities know best, not faceless bureaucrats sitting in Whitehall following an ideology of a particular government. Over the last few months, we have seen a number of Catholic dioceses trying to reinvigorate the academisation agenda in their schools. Some of the narrative given to schools is effectively to force all Catholic schools under their jurisdiction to set up and form Catholic academy trusts. It is alarming that in some cases the rationale being used by the CES is COVID-19, with justifications given that it, quote, accelerates the demographic shifts initiated by Brexit, and that it has so exploded the economy that it puts paid to any lingering hopes of a new post-austerity financial settlement for schools. Surely such claims are simply unacceptable. And did you notice that the best interests of the children and their outcomes were never mentioned once? It also runs deeper than these top-down directives. It is clear that in some Catholic schools there are selection processes for foundation governors put in place where effectively they have to commit to implement the academisation agenda in order to be appointed. This challenges one of the most basic responsibilities that a member of a governing board is duly bound to exercise. Effective governance is dependent on the willingness and the ability of all members of the board to ask rigorous and searching questions, display critical awareness and come to robust and rigorous evidence-based judgments in the interest of the pupils and the communities that they serve. It is essential that foundation governors are able to freely weigh decisions on academisation based on their knowledge of the school itself and the community that it serves. During an online meeting with some Catholic heads in the Birmingham diocese, I was surprised to find that, having contacted us due to their opposition to the Catholic academisation agenda, there were very few contributions from heads. This continued until one head was brave enough to say they were all afraid to speak in case the messages got back to the diocese. I then gave them my email address so that they could email me and I would read out their contributions anonymously. I was inundated with stories of how they were being pressured and how afraid they were of losing their jobs if they didn't agree with the change in structure. I was shocked that our members were being ruled by fear in this way. There are also standalone academies facing pressure, being forced into maths against their will. This conference is unacceptable and we must call it out. It's the creeping centralisation of schools by this government, and despite claims to the contrary, autonomy is being taken away from our school leaders. Michael Gove, the architect of the Academies Act, once claimed that converting to academy status gave schools more freedom and autonomy. A decade on, and those claims have been found to be bogus. I hope that our new Secretary of State is listening. He has indicated on several occasions that his decisions will be based on evidence, although his comments today show that perhaps he has not yet had time to examine all the evidence carefully. We will not stand by and see schools and our colleagues being bullied or cowed by diktats from Whitehall in this way. NAHT have opposed forced academisation from day one. We have a proud history of defending community schools from this toxic policy. We've taken on the bullying academy brokers and won. We've taken on Nicky Morgan and her white paper on universal academisation and won. Now, Conference, we must do the same again and send a clear message to this government and to those drafting a new white paper on further top-down reorganisation that we will not stand by and see our schools treated in this way. It's time for us to raise our voices and our heads and say no to forced academisation, full stop. Conference, I urge you to support this motion.
Speaker Emily at mic number 1.
It's me again, yeah. I second this motion and I'm quite passionate about this. As a young teacher, I worked in a school in a very deprived area geographically. The children were extremely disadvantaged. They had high preschool meals. There was all sorts of factors against them. We were a community school. We did amazing things for those children. We were in special measures. We were on a journey out of special measures and we came out in record time in 12 months. But in that 12 months, we had an academy order placed on us. And like our colleague from the TUC who came to speak to us at officials conference, Rob stepped in to support my school. And thankfully, we managed to turn it around. And lo and behold, literally 6 months after the academy order was revoked, the school got a good. So there is no need for any school to be forced academy.
And speaker at mic number... Oh, sorry, you're not speaking. Anybody else wishing to speak? No? Oh, yes, speaker at mic 1, please.
Kevin Burnett from Bath and North East Somerset branch. Just like to ensure that the bit about forced cannibalisation is both overt and covert means, because sadly there's a lot of covert measures that are going behind the back door, which are forcing schools into no option, and that's not just overt policy. Thank you.
Okay, and now I will move to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? That is unanimously carried. Before we move to our final motion of conference, after this motion, there will be a short closing ceremony. My guess is it's going to be about 6 or 7 minutes. So please, if you possibly can, please do stay for that, and then we will formally end conference. So, let me discuss that with Magnus and Paul Whiteman, okay? Because the reason I hesitate, it was Chatham House rules, which I don't think, we could say something generally, but we did say we wouldn't talk about it outside the room, Alan. I'm happy to say it was a positive meeting, but I at least need to check with the experts, okay? So the final motion is then number 38, lowering the voting age in elections, standing in the name of the Secondary Sector Council. Welcome, Stuart.
Good afternoon. Graveyard slot here. Stuart Beck, Havering branch, but actually born in Sunderland. Secondary schooled in Norfolk. Okay, and living in London, so part of the, thank you, Greater London Group. And as you've just been told, I present this motion on behalf of Secondary Committee. It does what it says on the tin, but it also sums up, I think, a lot of what we've heard and we've debated over the last 3 days, particularly if you were at officials' conference as well. 3 years ago, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the last major change in broadening suffrage votes for women, and we're calling for National Executive today to campaign for the voting age to be lowered to include 16 and 17-year-olds in elections. Why? And I just want to make 4 brief points. Earlier this year, I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but the Children's Commissioner conducted the Big Us survey. 500,000 children and young people responded. That's a massive response. And that data revealed that children and young people are very much engaged in the world around them. They care about their local communities. They want a better world where they're listened to and can help change not only their lives, but also the lives of others. They are major stakeholders and they care about equality, fairness, the environment, the impact on coronavirus on their future in the short and long term. Our union's tagline is growth, community and voice. And in the last 3 days, we've reaffirmed that the absolute focus of our vocation is children and young people. The voice of more young people needs to be heard in our democratic and political processes. The Big Us survey showed how articulate and thoughtful young people are about such important matters and their desire, which we see every day in school, to build a better world. Young people can be trusted, and there is just so much going on at the moment that will have huge impact on their future. We've also heard so much since Thursday about all the great things that are going on in Wales. So thank you, Wales. Great stuff going on in Wales. We're all going to move to Wales now. Here's another one. This final motion focuses on the great vote of confidence that Wales has given in recognition of their young people in reducing the voting age there in local elections. There should be equality with Wales for young people in the other jurisdictions as well. Cadea Batul, I hope I've pronounced her name there rightly, at yesterday morning's official conference, she actually really exhorted us to be the agents of change. And this motion shows and represents a concrete action we can take and campaign for as agents of change. It represents a culmination of all we do with our pupils from the early years to Key Stage 4, and to then actually empower them in Key Stage 5 to join us in that responsibility of being the agents of change through the democratic and political processes to build that better world. Our society, as it did for women back in 1918, should give the vote to more people, to more young people, as a start at local level. They're up to it, they are ready for it, and they deserve it. President, conference, I move.
I think we have a speaker coming to mic number 2, and then Dave, would you like to go to mic number 1? Mic number 2 first, please. Thank you.
I'm not going to touch it.
Okay.
Ian Taylor again, Nottingham City. I think that we just have to be aware as well that we live at a time where even if we enfranchised all 16 and 17-year-olds, we're at a point where actually the universal franchise is being eroded by certain policies. We speak about minority communities, and there are active policies at the moment that will disenfranchise large numbers of people and make it more difficult for them to vote. So I think we just have to bear that in mind as well. And I don't know how we do it or how we educate against it without being too political, but I think it's important to say.
Dave Woods, London Region, Ealing Branch. First of all, I want to make sure that Stuart's motion, being in that graveyard slot, also got some speakers, because we've been talking about this together. So we're all here as educators, and we want all our pupils to grow up to be passionate, articulate, engaged, and forward-thinking as they look towards their own future. So I say to you, why would we not support engaging these same young people in the democracy element of British values that, after all, we've been told time after time after time we must teach, so it's time to put it into action. But then last night at dinner, I found myself in the presence of the same visitor Tim encountered. Perhaps it was because I'd been made to wear the London regalia and it was an attraction. And so in discussing this motion, Stuart and myself were very firmly and quite unequivocally told by this visitor, young people should have no representation unless they are paying taxation. What an awful statement to make. What is it that any politician or heads of quangos would worry and fear of giving 16 and 17-year-olds some voting rights in this country, unless they worry these young people might actually use that vote to judge the kind of job they're doing and find a way of getting them out of their office? I ask you all to support this motion.
Thank you, Dave. And I thought it was just me she liked, but obviously, whatever. The regalia. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. Okay, does anyone else wish to speak? Doesn't look like it. So, for the final time this conference, let's move to the vote. All those in favour, please. Thank you very much. All those against? That is unanimously carried. Thank you, gentlemen. We now have our closing ceremony. Paul Whiteman is hoping to be able to join us to the end. He's at the moment doing an interview for the BBC, but if he can get here, he obviously will. First of all, it's appropriate at the start of this closing ceremony for me to say thank you, a very sincere thank you, to all the members of National Executive who've either retired or resigned since our last conference, which was back in 2019. And we do thank them for their service to the association. And they are Ian Taylor, Laurie Dixon, Marie Gaskill, Chris Hill, Tony Draper, Rob Campbell, Steve Baker, Anne Lyons, and Sally Hampson. Some of them are in the room now. Can we please show our appreciation? And I want to say thank you to all the National Executive members. My word, they do work so hard. It's not just coming together. We're coming together next week in Birmingham, which is going to be great, but there's a huge amount of work National Executive members do, not just when we meet at Exec, but throughout the year. And to thank them for their encouragement, their appropriate challenge, which is a really important role, and their support for myself and the other national officers. Thank you. I'd like to give a special thank you to my presidential aide. Where's Amanda? Wave at me, Amanda, please. Where are you? Oh, marvellous, thank you. I visited Amanda's school a few weeks ago, absolutely superb school up in Bolton, and I was talking with Amanda there, and she said, Tim, my job is to make you look good. I really like the sound of that. Now, whether she succeeded, you're the judge, not oh, yeah. I honestly wasn't fishing for applause there, but I was going to say, whether I look good or not, I've certainly felt good because of, Amanda, your support, making sure I was in the right place at the right time. There's only one point she couldn't find me today, was I was in the gents' toilets, and she wasn't allowed to go in there. But other than that, she's been right behind me. Okay, I'd like to say... I would like to thank, they have done a brilliant job, the London region local officials who've helped steward and marshal this event. Can we thank them? I said earlier how wonderful the food is here, and I think not just the food, the staff have been absolutely brilliant. Can we thank the County Hall venue staff? And then a thank you to the AV team from EY3 Media. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Although I wish it had been turned off on a couple of occasions, can I thank the team operating the live stream, which is Oxyfire Media. Thank you to them. And then, and I'm going to name these people, this team have done an absolutely brilliant job. The BSL interpreters, that's Anne Marie Murray, Jen Smith, Bernadette Travers, Joe Ross, and Paul Price-Jones. Thank you to them. Two other final thank yous. The NHT staff. I actually said this at the officials conference yesterday, and so forgive me for those who've heard this once before, but I mean, I've been to so many of these conferences. I had no idea of the incredible organisation that goes into putting an event like this on. It's immense. It's been going on for months, and the workload of so many NHT staff members is incredible. I can't possibly mention them all. The two I will mention, but that's not to say nobody else has done anything, because they have absolutely been fantastic as a team. But a particular mention to the gentleman on my left, Magnus Gorham, along with Laura Robinson. But to all the NHT staff, again, this is one of the absolute joys of being the National President. You do get to know and work closely with the NHT staff, and I truly hold them all in the absolute highest regard. They are a superb team. Can we again give all the NHT staff... And my final thank you, and a very sincere thank you, is to yourselves, the delegates. You've conducted yourselves brilliantly this conference. If you recall what Paul Whiteman said regarding our visit for the Secretary of State, emotions, let's be honest, were running really high in the room before the Secretary of State came. You conducted yourself with great professionalism and dignity, and I think that will have been noted very positively by the Secretary of State, so thank you for that. And this is nothing to do, and I truly mean this with me being president, but I actually feel this has been a very, very special conference. And just before I came back in over lunch, I was trying to reflect on why. I think it's obviously partly all the circumstances we've been through. It's unprecedented. Everything we've come through together, to be meeting up in person again is brilliant. I think there's something also to do with this wonderful venue. I actually feel very comfortable being here and you're not a million miles away. There's a sense of unity and togetherness I think has shone through. But above all, it's the way you have conducted yourselves. And I really want to echo Deborah's comments a few minutes ago. You've conducted yourself with honesty, with openness. Deborah, you used two words I jotted down. You're spot on with courage and that word solidarity. And I would also add good humour. You have made it an absolute pleasure for me to chair the conference, and I'm sure you are. I am so proud to be a member of our union, NHT. Thank you.
Tim, it falls to me to, we've had an extraordinary conference, as you just alluded to there. Thank you for your chairing of the past 2 days. I think we all witnessed, didn't we, the skills that Rona was talking about when she introduced you yesterday. Tim, we did have a very raw, very real session earlier today, and we were working through the policies linked to mental health. And Tim, in that session, I think you showed your wisdom and sensitivity towards the people that were there. Your reactions to what was said by delegates was human and it was kind. And that says a lot about the person that I know as Tim Bowen. So I would like to give our thanks for your chairing on the last 2 days. Thank you, Tim.
Paul Wadman, you're not actually listed on my script, but I think I can't just end without giving you a chance to say a few words before my final ending.
Well, I didn't expect to have the chance to speak again, but given the opportunity, a General Secretary will never say no if there's an audience in front of him. But I think what I'd like to reflect upon is we've been on the road in conference season now, I think it's probably 5 weeks. I think I can count the number of nights I've spent in my own bed on one hand during those 5 weeks. And it's getting a bit tiring, I have to say. But I tell you what I've witnessed today has completely reinvigorated me as an individual to go out there and keep representing you, because where it really matters is in education. So we're going to make sure that from next week, when I've had a week off, we'll get on that road again, and we'll make sure that we hold Nadeem Sahawi to his promises to work with us and be evidence-led in all the decisions that he makes. With your support and with your kind of commitment to your colleagues as well, I absolutely guarantee we'll be successful.
So, in just a moment when we leave at the end of conference, if you leave by the door on your left, I've been told you can grab a coffee and a cake for the journey, so please do. And finally, normally we're saying we look forward to seeing you in a year's time. It's going to be shorter than that. All being well, we look forward to seeing you in Telford in 2022, the dates of which are Friday the 29th of April to Sunday the 1st of May. Please make a note of it and encourage others from your branches to attend. And on that note, I've been looking forward to this, I formally declare the conference closed.